Well, the green room was sure hot and freaking controversial. I wonder what's going to happen now.
I thought those people would never leave, man. That's what happens when you don't lock the door. You just let anybody in.
We'd like to welcome you to the Trampled Underfoot podcast show. Your hosts are Mark Lindsay over there on the West Coast and Eloy Escojedo over here on the eastern seaboard coast. Lower 48, but lower than the other 47. We're quite as low as you can get.
How low
We
can
welcome
you
you.
go?
What's going on, Mark?
Oh man, just trying to stay ahead and wishing for spring to finally show up. I mean, it's still nothing but dreary winter weather here. We get a couple of nice days and then rain came back. Psych. We had snow again the other day. So it I'm like, Mother Nature, go home, you're drunk.
Everything's kind of weird, like,
Yeah.
you know, the further out we get from our beginnings, and the earlier days of our, life is splendorous. Things have gotten really surreal in this world. I don't know if I know we've talked about it, but I don't know if it's oneself. It has to be one's own perception of as you get older, where you start to see kinks in the armor, tears in the the fabric, a little bit of spackle being necessary to fill the cracks of the of the drywall.
And the paint's peeling in this corner and there's cobwebs in that corner, and man, I should have fixed this last year. And what are you gonna do?
There's something about it. There's something about it as you head headlong into the whatever that means, the future, and you have stamped visa passport locations on your life experience, where you're like, wow,
really, yeah, for sure. And it's up to each individual to decide, especially on something like that. Have I seen and done enough? I mean, I say my traveling days are over, because I really, we explored. Believe me, we explored. We drove all over the place. We took trains, we flew, we did whatever. I mean, we traveled around Europe, we traveled around the US. And it's just like, okay, that was fun. It was great to go and see and experience, but I think I want to settle down now and just kind of rest.
Yeah. I always say with my cousins, and I leave people in shock. I've mentioned it to a few people in private, but I want to go to Spain, and I want to go to the Pantheon, where the Escojedo family is located. My great grandfather and ancestors are, and I just want to crawl right up in there and lay down and just rest. And that's it. And people, because the imagery and the thing of that. But what I'm trying to say is that it's like a return to an origin. But I can't really say that fully. It's very true, blood-like true. But it's not the problem with being an American. The problem with being an American is that we have many locations of which our origins proceeded from. So I could just say the same thing by going to Cuba, by going to the Canary Islands or Malaga.
Sure.
Because those are all locations. So in fact, what I should say is that a little bit of a quartering and distributing across the world in locations appropriate, and then calling that done.
Well, but it's great to go see and do and experience all of them. It's one thing to read about it and see a picture of it in a book or online or something like that. It's another thing to actually be there and walk in the same fields your great grandfather was walking in, or walking down the street that your Uncle Mateo walked in.
Mhm.
or walk down the street that is named after him.
Mhm.
It's one thing to see it, and it's another thing to actually do it. And that was part of the adventure for us when we were in the midst of all of our travels. Was I'd seen countless photos of the Eiffel Tower, but I can say I've been up to the top, and I've looked out over Paris from the Eiffel Tower, and it was an experience I wouldn't trade.
Yeah.
You know, would I now take the time and spend the money to go do it again? I don't think so. Probably not. But we were there, and it's like you have to. We had gone to Paris with my parents. They came over to Europe to stay with us for a few weeks and just travel around. And we went to, oh my gosh, traveled all over Germany and went to Paris, went to Amsterdam, Luxembourg, Belgium, and just really had a good old time about it. So when you get to these places, you have to go and experience these things and go do these things. And because it's one thing to look at the Arc de Triomphe in a video or something, but it's another thing entirely to stand there and experience all the traffic whizzing around it and everything, and the people and the noises and the smells and all that other good stuff. So I don't know. I don't see a thing wrong with wanting to go to Spain and go to those places, or wanting to go to the Canary Islands and go visit those places personally. Because although that's not your 100% your origin, it is a part of your origin story.
Mm-hmm.
And it is, without those places, you wouldn't be. So,
Yeah. Without the history of the world, I wouldn't be. We wouldn't be.
mhm.
Without the history and events of the world, you know,
Yeah.
it's an incredible thing to think about. And as I've been looking through all these things, without our parents, we wouldn't be, and that goes back in time and so on. And
Sure.
I did want to mention that today is so my mother passed away 25 years ago
Oh,
today.
wow.
I was 22 years old when my mother passed away.
I, I, I didn't
22
realize it had
years
been
old.
that long ago.
I was 22 years old.
Mhm. Man.
That you know is just and since that time I mention it often,
Mhm.
and you know it may be a little bit too heavy for a lot of people,
Mhm.
but you know 22 22 years old, my mom passes away. That changed me forever in ways that are unmentionable,
Mhm.
because it's a complete, just your brain, your heart, your soul, everything. She did so much in a short time, though. She came with her sister and her two parents in 67, I believe it was.
Okay.
And when they came here, what Cubans did was they arrived at in the airport, and if you had sponsors, they would come and pick you up and take you home. We had a or they had a sponsor, but she was in Puerto Rico because the husband worked with a company, a Jello company or something or other. They was doing business back and forth and stuff, and they were family.
Mhm.
But they arrived, and another family member came and picked them up, because what they used to do is they'd read off the names of the arrivals of the Cubans. They'd read off a list on the radio, on Cuban radio, because even back then they had various, like the Cubans when they came here in 62,
Mhm.
they started to translate everything they did in Cuba over here.
Uh,
And that meant, and a lot of people underestimate the influence that Cubans, because we're very a small little, and I don't personally um categorize myself as a Cuban, because that's a nationality at
mhm.
all, like at all. That's not negating my mom and dad,
Right.
and whatnot. It's just that I simply am not, logistically speaking, I'm just an American. I mean, that's how I see it.
Mhm.
But they came and they started to acquire land and purchasing businesses and starting business, and they just went through the litany. And it's one of the points, a sore point for various communities that were here prior
Mhm.
to this day, because they went across the board, purchasing, built, trade, buying, and it was an incredible thing. I mean, and you can it can be verified. A lot of people don't
Yeah.
realize what exactly. So my mom and they rented a little apartment in Little Havana, which it became Little Havana because all the Cubans ended up there. And she was 15 years old. My aunt was 11 years old, her sister.
Mhm.
My grandmother was like just 40, roughly.
Mhm.
That's how young they were. And little by little, things unrolled. And she ended up meeting my dad here, and they came married and came to Sweetwater. There was 3,000 people at best here. And immediately they started to do community stuff because that's what they were used to doing,
Mhm.
these people. They started doing community stuff. There was no arts and there was nothing artistic about the place.
Well,
Although in the 40s, there was a time when they had strawberry festivals and such, to be fair. But when my parents arrived here in the 70s, there was nothing to speak of. And in fact, go ahead.
wasn't your mother instrumental in getting a public school out there?
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Because you were bused into Miami, weren't you?
My my father would take my mom and I to downtown. He'd drop her off at her job at a credit union, and then they dropped me off at a private school.
Oh, okay. Okay, that's how it went. But there was
Yeah.
no public school in Sweetwater.
No, they had to be bussed.
Mhm.
My mom began to. She formed a women's community league or whatnot,
Mhm.
and all the women from various backgrounds got together and they started to do services to give, help for the poor or disadvantaged, let's say,
Mhm.
and open, they did art expositions and all that that didn't exist prior.
Mhm.
I mean, full throttle with like prominent artists and stuff.
Mhm.
Many Cuban artists that also came, helped, and contributed to create an ambiance of art and culture, which a community needs.
Mhm.
Um, and I remember it. I would go down to the art exhibitions that were rolled out,
Mhm.
and I'd stand there and see all these people. And my mom was the one organizing and such, and the toy drives and all that stuff. And she packed in a lot in a short time, and you know, and my dad likewise. They collected for kids in Nicaragua and other things, just so much because you know it's what they did. They were a a pace apart. So I had a good. I grew up barefoot, running around with my friends, and
Yeah.
getting into all sorts of trouble. And they thought that I would do the right thing along the way because that's what people did back then when they where they came from. But I was trouble. If they showed me Ozzy Osbourne one day, my neighbors, and that's all she wrote with
Yeah.
with that creature on the
Mhm.
cover and
Yep.
ACDC, and that's it. I was like, this is where it's at.
Mhm.
So, but yeah, so 22 years of age, she passed me when I was 22 years old. She passed away, and that's 25 years ago. And yeah, it's there's no words to say. There's no
Yeah.
words to say, and and I think that screwed me up big time, like
Well,
big time. No, I don't think I know the emptiness in the wake of it, and I'm not trying to poor me because I did what I had to do, and I
mhm.
have always done what I had to or what I wanted the hell to do. That's
Yeah.
one of the reasons, and but I always used to do that anyhow. I do what the hell I want to do,
Mhm.
and it falls on one's head and stuff. But anyways, I wanted to share that and leave that there for the record. So
Yeah.
I appreciate the indulgence.
Yeah, I don't see it as indulgence as much as it is. It's something I can kind of relate to, but I was much older when my mother passed. I mean, she passed in 2012, so we're looking at just 11 years ago. But in fact, in May, it'll be 11 years. But doesn't make it any easier. You know, when you're younger, it's hard to think of your own mortality, let alone the mortality of your parents. So at 22, I mean, I know what I was doing when I was 22. I was basically just getting out in the world.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'd been in the army for a couple of years. I was married. I had kids, and I was trying to be an adult and make my way. You know, life has other plans, but you do what you do, and you can have all the plans in the world that you want, but life is going to dictate what actually happens. So, that marriage didn't last, and I live close to my kids now, within 10 miles, but life took me on a very wild ride to get here. So, what can I say?
Yeah, I it's not, you have, or I have, you have to process and learn how to deal with life events so that you can put one leg in front of the other and sort of navigate and walk around and do the things you have to do.
Mhm.
But if you think about what your own experiences in life and the losses that have occurred, um, well, they're all important because it's our experience with our loved ones.
Mhm.
But there's a little bit of possibility to reflect, which I have and do, which is that other people likewise are affected by their life events, and
Sure.
people are walking around dealing with it at all different stages and levels of their life, depending
Sure.
on what. So another thing is a little bit of humility does come to play, as well as less, although if you're a pissy person to begin with, it's hard, but you're slightly less judgmental when it comes to certain things, or at least that's what's
Yeah.
ended up for me. I mean, for
Well,
years, since I was 22, for years, I'll just say this one thing. I would burst into fits. Like, I'd be alone, and I just punched the crap out of the steering wheel if I was in the car getting ready to go somewhere. I'd be okay wherever I was at, and then I'd get in the car, and as I was going to turn the ignition on, I'd start smashing the and I know exactly what I was, why I was reacting that way. Like, I knew as I was doing it. It's not like I'm a freaking, animal. I know what's going on, but my body
mhm.
needed to release that tension. And that happened a lot because and then at night I would wake up gasping, and I know the dreams that I was having, or
Mhm.
nightmares. And that just happened and happened and happened for years. That's how savage it was. And I'll tell you, you know, um, we learn to to deal with it. But that's how important, and the people that you love are, depending on the person's perspective. But I think that that's across the board, roughly. That
Yeah.
that's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Everybody
can't-
handles it in their own way.
yeah, yeah,
Some people draw in on themselves, some people open it up for the world to see. It's just,
yeah,
and every degree along that spectrum that you can imagine. I
yeah.
mean, and you just never know.
And go
Go
ahead.
ahead.
No, no, go ahead. Go ahead. I was gonna say one last part
Go
section.
ahead. Go ahead.
Last section here. Another bookend to bookend this. A lot of people. I'll say two things. I was left with a lot of memories, not only in my head, in my soul, but physical documentation, photos, and so on and so forth. And the reason I've started the journey at the time I did was with the assistance of, to be frank, with Steve, which said, "Here's Ancestry, and how does it work, Steve?" And Steve said, "You do X, Y, and Z." And he guided me through that, and it allowed me to organize things. At the beginning, I would write very basic information, like very simple this is mom and this is dad and blah blah blah. But as you start to organize things, you start to, well, no, here's the description, and you become better. I've become better at writing English to express what I want to express,
Mhm.
because I'm considering, as opposed to getting the job done of whatever I want to say, I'm actually thinking consciously of, well, this is what this is. So it's helped me in various ways. Well, anyways, in order to not leave all those items, photos, documents, and stuff, I began. But what I've found is that they left me so much that it's enriching and it's comforting for me. So basically, I do it because it's quite deeply comforting for me. And the last part that I'll say is, if you recall years ago, Jamie Page and I started a show called The Mad Maker Show.
Yeah.
And it was on the heels of working with Matt Haas and other people like Ryan Bitters and Doc Jared Hildebrand and all that, where we had a few series of shows. I decided to reach out to Jamie Page, and he agreed to it, and we began the Mad Maker Show. But if you remember the Mad Maker Show back then, before I was doing this genealogy stuff, if you remember, we were interviewing woodworker or maker people. But notice what was happening. What was I doing? What I was doing was I was interviewing them more so on their life stories
Mhm.
than on their woodworking projects, although it was part of it. But the point is that I've always had that sort of scribe-like feature somewhere in there, documentary style type person or whatever, since the beginning. And in fact, last thing I'll say, yes, I did mention your name, JP. Last thing I'll say is that recently I've been putting out videos from the early 2000s, which I recorded my grandmother and other people, interviewing them. But there was the only rhyme or reason to me doing it was that I'm just storing this. Literally, I was thinking that back then. So I've always had, I'm not anywhere's different than I've always been. In what I'm doing now is just another iteration.
Mhm. Now it's more personal.
Now it's more personal and more detailed. Thanks to all the people that have helped guide me in the direction that opening up the doors and helping me rethink my way of writing, because I had the potential to sit and be nuanced in terms of descriptive and this and that. And I'm not saying I'm some sort of like what do you call it, Hemingway or something by any stretch.
Yeah.
What I'm just saying is that I consider it different than I used to. So anyways,
Yeah.
that's the whole thing.
Well, another thing to think about is the fact that you're not only doing it for yourself the way you were back then in the early 2000s. Now you're doing it for other people to read later on. And you've made that distinction. And that may be one reason why you find yourself being more descriptive, because you can talk about your aunt, but you knew her. So you don't have to include all the information about her because you know it. But now you know that somebody down the road is going to be reading this who doesn't have all that information. So you're learning to include all of that information in your narrative about them.
Right.
And that makes a huge difference. And that paints a complete picture, or helps to paint a more complete picture, because nobody can paint a complete picture except the person themselves. And in too many cases, that person is already gone.
Yeah. And these photos that people take across history, when they don't write names on the photos or in the back.
Yeah. You don't know who the heck it is.
It's like you're looking at it and say, man, this could be something. And it is, but there's no way to pass it on with any rhyme or reason, because who's who?
Yeah. I want to go off on this a little bit here, but I want to address a question we've got out here in the chat real quick from Robin. She wants to know, she has a question about the podcast. When people want to listen to the podcast, how do we listen to it and not see the live? Well, my first reaction is, what? You don't want to look at this, gemstone girlfriend? I mean, come on.
My answer would be, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
turn around. Every now and then I look apart, and I need you more.
No, that's not where I was going. We used to do an audio version of this podcast, Robin, to answer your question. We um, had a deal with, was it Spreaker?
Yeah,
Well,
and we
they
still do.
became Spreaker, and we still have that relationship with them. We could go do it again. We could pick up where we left off if we wanted to, but neither of us want to do that. And what we would do is we would come in here and we would record, and then we would take turns, uh, strip the audio out of this video recording, and we would take turns. One week Eloy would edit that, and then the next week I would edit that,
We
and
did that
then
for
we would
years.
put it on this podcast platform on Spreaker, and then we would link it, and it would go out to iTunes, it would go out to Amazon, it'd go out to iHeartRadio, and I think we were even on Spotify. I don't remember.
Apple, Apple.
Apple Music, yeah. When they changed from iTunes to Apple, um, but it went out all over the place. And I see now you're asking because you made your own podcast. What you need to do is you need to get uh, hook up, uh, create an account with a podcast service, and there are several out there,
Yeah,
and they will distribute it through the various podcast services and podcast servers. We did that. In fact, we did 180 episodes that were video on YouTube, and then we would edit the audio and post that on the audio side. And people could download the podcast and listen on their way to work or what have you, like the way you're talking about. But we got to 180, it just got to be too much work for the both of us because both of us had other things going on. And we just kind of stopped doing it at 180. She says, we used to use SoundCloud. It's so easy. Well, there you go. There you go.
I like my answer better.
We
Turn
don't
around.
we don't use the YouTube podcast thing. I don't know anything about it. So if you find something about that, let me know.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, we just decided basically it was too much work. We never had a humongous following anyway. And
Don't be bashful.
then we just decided, we weren't really going anywhere. We weren't gaining as much traction as we thought we would. So we just said, you know what? We've got a core group of people who are, right here, right now with us. Let's just do this live, and talk with them and BS with them. And we started including, your comments and your questions. Oh, that was Jamie that said you used to use SoundCloud. Okay. When you did that was Makers International, right? See, Jamie was part of a podcast too. So, and there's a novel idea.
What?
Whoops. There it is. There's a novel idea, but I don't think Steve does podcasts, and I don't think he wants to start. And I don't blame him. So, yeah. So that was the long answer to the short question. If you want to make it a video, quote unquote, podcast, then YouTube Live, that's what Eloy and I are doing now. And that's the only thing we're doing.
And you can always extract, like, you can always use YouTube,
Mhm.
extract the audio, open up a Facebook page dedicated to your podcast, post the audio there as
Mhm.
episodes, and whoever wants to go or share the link or blah blah blah. Like, there's
Mhm.
many
Yeah,
variations that you could use in order to get your stuff out there,
right.
um, in the sea of this technological world that we live in now.
Yeah. The problem is, and it's becoming even more so, um, market saturation. because Eloy and I are proof of this. Anybody with a webcam and a microphone can do this. It doesn't take much to start a channel and just start doing live streams like this. Now, Eloy and I are fortunate. We know people. We know a lot of people. Some of them come here and hang with us. Some of them don't. I mean, Jim Dockrell's one of the originals. You know, he's been here, and Steve is the ultimate original. He's been here since day one. And these are friends who sometimes are interested in what we're talking about, and sometimes they're not. But just give it a good go. You
And
will.
if you think about it, they're pretty good because they whatever they don't like, they well, that's not true. I was about to give them more credit then because Steve Shirley says clearly that's a bunch of horse radish.
Yeah, yeah, we get to talking about music because Steve isn't interested in the music that Eloy, and I talk about, and that's legit. That's cool, but I think that's when he goes and watches YouTube videos is when we're over here nattering on about Pink Floyd or Led Zeppelin or whatever because he just really couldn't give a rip.
The way I picture the way I picture Steve watching is different probably than all you because I see him sitting in his office, which is kind of like a computerized sort of like a layer, let's say. I see him leaning back on his chair with a little, the striped red and white little boxes with popcorn, like that, and his feet up on the desk with bunny slippers, with pink bunny slippers on, and him eating that with a bowl of jelly beanies or whatnot next to him, and he's watching.
See,
I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
there's just a little bit of difference. I won't argue the bunny slippers because I mean that could very well be, but I don't know that Steve is a popcorn person. He more likely got him a handful of Tootsie Rolls or Swedish fish or something, or jelly beans or something like that, popping them suck. Have you seen his candy shelf?
Yeah, I have.
I
My goal
mean,
wasn't to be accurate, by the way.
dude, I've got Peeps back here. I've got Reese's Peanut Butter Cups back here. And that is the amateur hour compared to Steve. His candy shelf is better stocked than my pantry and my freezer. I ain't kidding you, man.
No, and in one of those like when you go out to get the newspaper in the movies, the dude always has the robes on, and one of those robes eating the popcorn. It doesn't have to be accurate. I'm just saying that to get it. Okay, finally, I got a I got a reaction.
He says, I got 4 kinds in front of me now. But you notice, Eloy,
Yeah.
there's no denial on the bunny slippers.
I'm telling you because I mean, but the big ones, right? Like they're
Yeah,
furry.
the big pink ones with the ears that are about a foot tall.
They stay.
And that's why he likes them. They tickle his knees as he heads for the bathroom, Oh my God, the mental image. Pardon me while I go gouge out my mind's eye. Let's open it up to y'all. What do you think? You wanna throw the link out here? Yeah, okay, let's do it. Let's throw the link out here and let's get a couple of people in. If you feel like being a part of this and coming on camera with us, there's the link. Come do it. Last week we had Daniel Haryu and Greg, the Snow Crusher. They came on, and we ended up going through Dan's record collection. So what the heck, come on in, take off your skin, rattle around in your bones. Uh-oh, Steve. You may consider that a threat.
For this segment we're about to do with people coming on, whoever wants to do it, we should have a little thing that you could queue up, and I would like it to be because you said you can come up on something like "Come and get your love," dun, 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 dun.
Yeah,
and it press the button, and that's just a little thing. If we use a short snippet, it won't. It'll be creative. What do they call it? Free license, creative, whatnot.
But you're a musician and a singer. You couldn't whip out the Casio and do a 10-second little sting.
Come and get your love. And then the little banner pops up. Come
Yeah.
and join the conversation.
Join the conversation. Be a part of the broadcast.
That must have scared everybody off.
It did. Because, I mean, the chat died. Uh-oh.
Well, it didn't scare everybody off.
There's the man, the myth, the legend himself.
You're coming on the heels of that song? Sheesh.
I missed the last part. I had to mute my my podcast. Come on.
Our theme for this segment from now on, and we're gonna have like a little banner thing and whatnot. It's gonna show up and to participate or something, and it'll be "Come and get your love."
Yeah, I'm
You came
told
right
that
on.
now.
Introduce yourself to the folks out there who may have never seen your smiling face and let them know where they can find you.
I'm Jim Dockrell, and I have been on Instagram and YouTube. Not lately, though.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's been a while since you posted a video.
Yes, I have. It's kind of gone by the wayside.
Ah, okay.
I'm not sure if I'll do it again or not, but I may.
Well, you left a lot of, I mean, you kind of left it at a cliffhanger. There's a lot of loose ends that you need to clean up for the folks that are watching your videos. You know?
Yeah, well, there's a lot of loose ends that got to be cleaned up around here, too.
Because, like, I want to know how the shop turns out and everything else.
You know, the shop hasn't changed much. I've hardly been in it all winter because
Yeah.
I don't heat it. And,
Okay.
you know, when it's sub-zero temperatures, it's not
That
fun
could be
being in the shop.
That could be a problem. That
Yeah.
can be a problem. That could be an issue. Okay. Well, you know, what can you say? For those that don't know, Jim and his lovely bride, you bought an old church, right?
That's correct, in Wawa, Ontario.
And it is, I'll just say it, it's flipping huge.
Yeah, there's about 7,000 square feet.
Yeah. I think if you add up every house I've owned, you wouldn't come up with 7,000 square feet. So,
Yeah, it's huge. We're kind of running it as a bed and breakfast right now.
okay. And how's that
Well,
going for you?
Well, winter's really slow. Like, winter is
I
dead.
bet. Mhm.
But summertime, we usually fill up and we're busy. We had one guy, he's been here all winter.
Mhm.
He's kind of grown roots here now.
Oh, okay.
Well, he was
Becoming a
supposed-
full-time tenant?
Pretty much, yeah. But his mother passed away about 3 years ago, and they finally sold the house. And
Ah, okay.
so he needed a place to stay, and he was going to go to Sault Ste. Marie, and
Mhm.
that's about 2.5 hours south of us. And found out what the rent was like there and decided to come here instead.
Well, now that's an interesting idea. And I'm going to ask you about this too, Eloy. What is the average length of stay for somebody coming to stay there?
For us,
Mhm.
3 or 4 months, 5 months.
Oh, really? That long?
Yeah, we specialize mostly in long-term and
Okay.
repeat people who come back.
Okay.
Like we're coming into the season now where we're probably going to get the forest firefighters calling
Oh,
up.
okay.
So
Now
they'll
that
come
makes
for the
sense.
summer, and they come from all over the province because
Mm-hmm.
Wawa is a training area,
Okay.
and housing's pretty short around here.
Mhm.
So they usually come for the summer, and then they book out from here. Some of them find apartments occasionally, but you know, then
Yeah.
they use this because they have to have a physical address.
Yeah.
That's part of the gig.
Mhm.
So, and then some find apartments, and some of them just stay for the summer, and and they can be gone for 20 days at a time if there's a fire.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
That makes sense.
yeah.
Now, where I'm going to bring you in on this, Eloy, is had you ever thought about something like that with the property behind you, renting it out short term, or do you prefer more long term tenants? No, come in and stay for 5 years, please.
I do it month by month,
Yeah.
but
Okay.
people usually stay, and the rent is expensive around here
Hmm.
due to Miami-Dade County being such a coveted place due to X number of reasons, but plus the land is depleted in terms of being able to build, so rent is extreme. I don't know how people do it. I don't know how people do it.
Well, both adults work or they have roommates or something like that. So
Yeah,
That's kind of like what it is all over. It seems rent is really high.
it's not going in the right. Well, right is relative. It's not going in the same direction. Well, actually, that's wrong too. It's always increasing, so it's all going in the right direction.
if you own the place that's being rented, yeah.
Well, not necessarily, because what happens
Mhm.
is that the rents are parallel to the taxation
Right.
imposed on by your local,
Mhm.
you know,
Yeah.
governmental whatnots. So
Yeah.
it's all a chain that rolls downhill, and the person at the bottom gets it, in the noggin.
Yeah. Yeah. No doubt. No doubt. Well, I was just wondering if you had thought about the short term type of a thing, because I've heard a lot of people talking about like Airbnb and things like that, and most folks don't build to have an Airbnb. They're just using extra space because, like, and you're in a perfect spot for that, Jim, in that you've
Yeah.
got so much room, you can afford to do that.
Well, we haven't really touched the church part itself. That's like what is it, 2,400 square feet
Hmm.
that we haven't touched yet.
Yeah.
It's still torn apart.
Mm.
So it's just the community center side of it that we live in upstairs, and we have the rooms downstairs. But we
Right.
didn't want to get into the Airbnb thing. We didn't want to be associated with them. There's some pretty bad stories about
Yeah.
both renters and landlords getting hosed.
Okay. So you just deal more local on a local level, advertise
Yeah,
there locally, and
yeah. Well, we get the occasional overnighters that are
mhm.
passing through
Yeah.
because we're we're 2.5 hours from Sault Ste. Marie, and we're 5 hours from Thunder Bay.
Hmm.
So anybody coming through Ontario, they it's a good place to stop.
Yeah.
It's handy.
Okay. I can see that. I can see that. Okay. All right. Well, I just wondered. I mean, I didn't have a direction to go with that. I just, you know, Jim's experience with what he's doing, and made me think, well, wait a minute, has Eloy ever thought about doing that? But I can completely understand why you wouldn't.
Well, we didn't
Yeah,
want to get in. We didn't want to get into the landlord situation.
Yeah.
Too many different regulations in that.
Hmm.
Whereas motel, hotel, shorter term stays,
Hmm.
it's a different purview altogether.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah.
you could have a snack shop in there.
Well,
Well,
that's
we do have a little bar type thing that's in the lobby where you can buy candy and chocolate bars and stuff like that.
well,
It doesn't make any money, but it's handy for the
that's
guests.
what I was wondering about when you was going to turn that church into a little dance hall or something like that. Have live bands and a bar.
And
Well,
you
we
could
don't
call
have
yourself the
water
preacher.
over on the church side, so anything that requires a bathroom
Yeah,
is
that could be an issue.
yeah.
You could
So
build a
we're
little
still
outhouse.
figuring out. We're thinking something retail.
Ah,
You could build a
okay.
little outhouse next to the river, and the toilet empties out into the downstream into the population, the little town, the little
Yeah, well,
township, so that when the women are using a bar of soap on top of the rocks in the
Oh my
river,
God.
it just it continues to get, the water gets darker and darker, and it's like, we can never clean our clothes. We don't know what's going on. Sorry.
Yeah,
not
now he
quite like
thinks
we're not
you're
quite that primitive here.
not quite Daniel Boone, huh? All right.
It's too cold. Yeah, and the water's too damn cold too.
Well, this is true.
Why does the soap keep? I don't know what. Why is there corn coming down from the
Okay,
up
that's
yonder?
good.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no. Oh no, the fish. Yeah. Yeah.
Wait a second. Now there's a corn in the whole cob. No,
That's
sorry.
I'm trying to think of somewhere else to go.
Anyways, happy birthday, Mark.
Well, thank you, Jim. I appreciate that.
That
Yes.
is true. That is
I
true.
became an official old man yesterday. And so much so I get my first Social Security check next month.
Yeah, well, you
So
finally caught up to me again.
yeah, for a little bit.
Yeah. Well, I'm
And
only a month older than you, but
yeah,
I am older.
yeah, well, that's okay. That's all right. I mean, there's always going to be somebody older and always going to be somebody younger.
Yep.
That's
So
where I
that's all
come
right.
in, gentlemen.
Yeah,
But I will be.
really.
But I love how you. But the timeline is a continuum.
Hmm.
So one thing I learned a long time ago, which maybe a lot of people, I think a lot of people do, is that whole notion of, oh, those older dudes know nothing, they know no squat,
Mhm.
and I know that's not the way to go. Not if you're now we're human beings, right? So we're going to argue points, but to not appreciate other people throughout the timeline
Hmm.
is a disservice to yourself and others, because there's so much richness that we learn, for goodness sakes.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the whole point. That's the whole point. It's a totally non-confrontational thing. It's just a lot of fun. And I enjoy meeting and talking with people and what have you. Yeah, my wife had to jump in there. I'm older than both of you. Yeah, well,
Yeah, but not put together.
yeah, yeah. Every morning I wake up, I feel like a 20-year-old. Yeah, in dog years, but that's okay. It does get better, but I don't know. Something that has come to me, and it is a matter of age. And I don't know if you've had the same experience, Jim, or you, Eloy, in that um, less and less bothers me. It's more like, yeah, okay, fine, whatever. And it's easier to prioritize what I'm going to be morally outraged over. When I sit down and I think about what is my business and what is none of my business, it's shocking and surprising how little of it is my business.
You
There's a lot.
still have that innate curiosity about what's going on, but when it comes right down to it, it's like, what a
Yeah.
bunch of what a bunch of weirdos.
Mhm.
So that analysis that both of you, and obviously by Jim's short reply, but succinct, he agrees to it for the most part. Um, I agree with it too, but horses for courses, it depends
Mhm.
on variables, because you could say that.
Mhm.
And I'm going to sound a little bit, but I'll give you an example. You could say that from the vantage point of, let's use Jim as an example. He's out in a place where it's relatively, there's not a lot of neighbors and whatnot and stuff. But if he had a hotel thing next to him with people throwing beer cans at the door, and you're trying to have a peaceful, introspective, or whatever the hell you're doing, you have that constant. You can't. I know it's not the same as what you were saying, but I'm
Mhm.
giving an example of things that can tee you right off,
Mhm.
regardless of any
Oh,
point on the life timeline. And so it depends, but as a matter of course, you I realize that 90 whatever percent of the things that one works out in their brain, conflicts or whatnot, everything, to the extent of anything that's conflictive or troublesome,
mhm.
at the end of the day, if you reach the conclusion, it's kind of like, so I understand that. I've
Mhm.
thought it for a while. But we have to keep busy doing something, so let's
Well,
bitch about
sure.
something.
Well, that's not to say that things don't cheese me off. Things cheese me off, believe me. But if I got myself worked up over everything that has the potential to make me mad, that's all I'd ever be.
Yeah.
And I'm just too tired to do that.
But remember, we are. There's a word for. Let me see if I can get it out of my skull. What does it mean when you work on something specifically? You're skilled in a certain thing. Uh, I can't find the word.
Obsessed.
Well, I wasn't going for obsessed, but that's the general direction.
Mhm.
Um, Expertise. So we're each expert. We're each experts
Mhm.
in the things we're focused on that pisses us off. What I mean by that is we have our pet peeves. I guess that's a
Mhm.
better way to say. We have our pet peeves when it comes to things that like irk and bother and discomfort us, or unresolved things that are particular to each person.
Mhm.
So we focus on those things, but even those
Yeah.
things can be tossed out the window in terms of what you're saying,
Yeah.
because at the end of the day, but it's not that easy, because we live in a situation, or I think that we all do, but I'm talking for myself right now. I think it's a human thing.
Mhm.
We're constantly, the big picture
Mhm.
has to take a back seat roughly, so that we live our lives. If you focus on the big picture, well, nothing matters. That not
Yeah.
nihilistic necessarily, but that kind of like relativistic.
Yeah. It's all
People are really
meaningless.
right, exactly.
Well, but but getting back to what you mean, sure, there are things that set us off and set us over the edge. And I'm not ignoring you, Frankie. I'll get to you. Trust me. But it also depends on your attitude and what you choose to do with it. Because I can't do anything about what anybody else says. So if I don't like broccoli, let's pick something benign like that. If I don't like broccoli, that's subjective. That's my opinion. And if I see somebody include broccoli in a casserole recipe, I have two choices. One is I can ignore it and move on, or I can jump down in the comments and call this person every name in the book about how stupid they are to include broccoli in this recipe. They've just ruined everything.
Mhm.
And I've just so if and it's disingenuous of me to keep going back to channels that have a love affair with broccoli, because all I'm doing is working myself up over the fact that they're using that damn broccoli. And if they would just listen to me, life would be so much better for everybody involved. When
That's
it's
an age
just,
thing also too, because
yeah.
you have a lower tolerance for stupidity,
Mhm.
particularly from yourself.
Right. And so the way I choose to deal with that is not to go to those channels that talk a lot about broccoli. I'm not going to subscribe to the organic broccoli farmer. I'm going to go hang over with the organic Bing cherry rancher. Yeah, they wild cherries as far as the eye can see. That's my herd of cherry trees. No, the cherry orchard.
Yeah.
I'm going to go, check that out because I'm all about Bing cherries. So I guess it's yeah, I can be morally or personally outraged over something, but if I keep going back to it, why am I doing that? Is it to feed my own ego? Is it because I think my opinion is really all that important? Or is it just to feed that anger so I can get into the comment section and vent my spleen and then move on after tipping off the, unwashed masses to my general knowledge, you know?
There's a lot. There's all that you said,
Mhm.
but there's other things too. Obviously,
Sure.
you're not going to encompass the whole spectrum of things,
No, no,
but the
no.
things that you chose to and didn't focus on is the one that I'm. One of them is the one that I'll focus on.
Mhm.
We do not dip our toes in the icy water of the river solely because it's uncomfortable and we're masochistic we sometimes do so in order to, and since you use broccoli and I'm
Mhm.
bringing in icy water because
Well, that's not where
stock
you
roll.
be, but I wasn't going to tell you that.
What's that? Go ahead.
Well, icy water is not where you grow broccoli, but I wasn't going to be the one to tell you that.
Yeah. Well, but no, but they sometimes don't they put they cover it with ice, you know, at the store, so it's
Oh,
nice
at the
and
store. Okay. Well, yeah, that's long after harvest, but yeah. Okay.
everything has a connection if you really want to. My point is that we sometimes confront the things that we dislike,
Mm-hmm.
not just to get some sort of moral whatnot, although that may be part of it, but we also have to confront pending questions and issues, depending on who you are, depending on the subject,
Mm-hmm.
in order to clear the weeds or underbrush, in order to see clearly what something is, if that's your intention, which is a lot that I do. I
Mm-hmm.
confront things that I dislike and listen to things that I dislike, which I am morally um, pissed over, let's say,
Mm-hmm.
but I do it to see what is going on in terms of the reasoning and whatnot and all these things. So if we do not do that, depending on the subject, I'm thinking certain things. If it's something as benign as, like, let's say, condiments or vegetables or stuff,
Mm-hmm.
but like you were using it as an example for the broad concept of
Yeah.
why do we put ourselves in situations that make us feel uncomfortable? Are we just trying to,
Well,
say, hey, this is wrong, I feel better about it, and it pisses me off, and now I'm coming back for more, and what the hell is going on? So that
If
concept is part of it, across the spectrum of what people think and do. But another part is, in order, if somebody, I don't know, if you don't get pushback on certain things that may or may not be false, you never know, and it's unresolved. So there's that within the human spirit.
there is some truth to that, but as you get older, you start learning to pick your battles.
if you go out looking for something to be offended at, you will surely find it.
Mhm.
But wait a second, let me just say, because, and all of that, so due to the fact that we're not talking about a specific particular thing,
Mhm.
what everybody is saying here,
Mhm.
Dockrell and Mark, is accurate, because as long as something is broadly stated,
Mhm.
our personal connections to, or things that arrive at in our minds heads about the broad topic, is all applicable. But if you hone it down to a specific
Well,
situation,
sure.
then we have to start to shift according to our experience, and whatnot. So
And
broadly
and
speaking, Jim is correct, Mark is correct, I'm correct.
and that's what I mean by you got to learn to pick your battles and learn where you're gonna focus. Because if I tried to pick every single thing, it's too much. And to me, that's a younger man's game. When I was in my 20s, I had the energy and I had the time and I had the voice to where, yeah, everything that torqued my tail rotor, I would speak out against, or I would research to find out was my perception of it correct.
Mhm.
Well, there's people out there that just go just bat crap crazy about things that have absolutely nothing to do with their lives.
Oh, you want to start a fight? Talk about pineapple on pizza.
Yeah.
You guys
If
you
you don't
guys
like
suffer
pineapple on pizza, don't order it.
That's it.
with your
Problem
collective
solved.
wisdom, with your guys' collective wisdom,
Oh, we in
according
trouble.
to according to
Mhm.
the length of experience in
Mhm.
this
There's a
world.
shallow well.
Mhm. Yeah, that's
I'm
what I
I'm
mean. We in trouble.
I'm giving it a nice, it's
Yeah.
um, so a merengue. I'm on top of the cake.
Oh,
With your
meringue. Yeah.
collective wisdom and whatnot, you're saying this right now,
Mhm.
but is it not true that who you are right now, and I can include myself in my particular,
Mhm.
as if age, which is age is an important factor, because the longer you live, the more you know and the more you deal
Mhm.
with. But putting that to the side, you are who you guys are, and you reach the conclusions that you do. And by the way, your conclusions, even though considering the wisdom expanse from zero to whatever,
Mhm.
you have different points of views on a whole
Yeah.
litany of things.
Yeah.
My question is it not true that who you are today, if not for that bumbling kid 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100 years ago, isn't it true that you wouldn't be who you are? You need to make those mistakes, and you
Oh
need to
yeah.
have that. If you don't have that outrage and that error, like these kids today, I can fool myself in thinking, man, what a stupid reply this kid is having to this particular problem. But that's me ignoring, and I'm just saying this right now because I do it too. Like we all do. I think we all do it.
Mhm.
And I'm thinking, this kid, where's his brain? And I forget that that kid is on a journey. And
Yeah.
right now, what he's thinking may sound all screwed up to me from my vantage, but in reality, now. If that kid is so hard headed that he never learns and he sticks with that stupid concept all the way, that's his problem.
He's going to have some hard lessons. Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
Jim?
It's
Yeah,
all hogwash.
it's definitely a journey. It's definitely a journey. And I mean, I've learned from a lot of hard lessons, and I made a lot of mistakes, and I've learned from them, and probably to the point where I could repeat them exactly.
I'm with you there. but
But that doesn't make me any smarter than anybody else. It's just a different set of experiences.
yeah. And well, we are the product of our own experiences. I mean, that's all we are. But it also depends on your outlook and how you want to get through life. And when I see you use the example of all these stupid kids, they don't know, or what a stupid answer to this solution. My gut used to be to try to argue or convince. And it took me a long time. I mean, I was in my 50s before I figured out that, dude, you're beating your head up against a wall. I've gone from that's a stupid attitude or that's a stupid response to they just don't know. He just doesn't know.
There's
Or
three
they
ways.
can't process.
There's three ways that people learn. Some people, you can tell them,
Mm-hmm.
and they will take in that information and they will learn from that. Some people, you have to show them because they're visual learners and they have to see it, and then they can mimic that. And other people, they just have to pee on that electric fence for themselves.
Yeah. And there's other people that will never learn and that will blame the fence.
Yeah.
So, it took it a while to sink in on me that if you hit your thumb with a hammer, accidents happen. If you do it again, expecting something to be different, we may have an issue. But if you blame the hammer,
oh, you're screwed.
Then now we have a problem.
But let me ask you guys this: what your answers? Is it not true? And particularly Jim's explanation with the three, you learn by listening or by hearing, listening, by visualizing, or by doing, which is the pissing on the electric fan. But isn't it true? I think it's implicit, but I think it's worth saying. And I'm wondering why you guys also didn't include this, because I think that this is an important thing. But you tell me if it's not to be included. Isn't it true that we're literally a combination of all those three things, depending, if you're thinking about it broadly, like human beings depending on the situation, or no?
Jim?
Yeah, it depends on the situation. Like I've heard things like, don't steal because it's wrong. And I can understand that.
Right.
But other things like, don't drive 20 kilometers over the speed limit because you'll get a ticket. Well, I've got that ticket.
Right.
While blindfolded and somebody's tickling your I'm not gonna say it. While blindfolded with your hands tied behind your back and somebody's tickling you.
One thing about banging your head against a brick wall is it feels really good when you stop.
Yeah. And you know what? The wall doesn't care.
Nope.
It's going to be a wall no matter what you do. So, um, there's a lot of that. Some lessons you learn by accident. Some lessons you learn, they don't know what they're talking about. Other lessons are pretty harsh. Other lessons are very easy, but I only had to put I was 4 years old. I only had to put the screwdriver into the light socket one time to discover that this was a really bad idea.
Hey, how many? Wait. Okay, so with using your guys' this and that, I have a few, but I'll just say, how many times did it take you guys, and you still screwed up every now and then, that when soap while you're showering gets into your eyes, it's a bad situation completely, and yet you try to avoid it, but every now in the blue moon, it could take a year, it could take a month, it could take 10 years, a little smidgen of that soap, and you're ruined for like the next 30 minutes.
Well, but accidents happen.
Accidents happen, yeah. But
you want to talk about learning lessons, Eli. Keep in mind that the two guys you're talking to right now.
Yeah, but we both still have all 10 fingers and toes.
We both know.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there's a contradiction with human beings. So that's another problem that we have. So as rational as you guys are being, and I understand, like, I don't disagree with you guys, like, at all. I'm just bringing in, like, whatever little extra smidgen just to see what happens. But as reasonable as we all can be, at the end of the day, we could be quite, and I'm not categorizing you guys specifically, I'm just saying as humans in general, there's a variation on the theme. We could be quite irrational.
Oh, yeah.
At the same time, knowing we're being quite... Human beings are impossible.
Yeah.
Because they're emotional.
Yeah.
We're emotional.
Well, and
we're impossible.
And we're egotistical. And that
comes with that comes with... Because there's no... That comes with it.
Well...
So well, I know how, because we've done it throughout history as a human population, but how do we process and get on with it as far as understanding what we think and what we do and the actions we take are the rational, true, proper, organized, meaningful direction to go in? I think it's a convoluted mismatch of crap happening.
It is. It is that mishmash of things happening because so much is out of your control. So much is out of your control.
Welcome.
State your name. Got an ass on you, all right. See, that's what he's talking about.
Yep, that's what I do. I don't know what that was, but we'll just let it sit back there.
Who is that?
I have no idea, but that's what happens when you go live.
That was Jamie Page.
Was that Jamie Page? Okay.
If I had to, so
I'm betting it's somebody that we've never met before, but that's okay.
Well, I saw a little icon of somebody new, but I don't think it's the same icon, and they could change it. But I'm thinking,
it's a different person.
Well, considering our viewer base, and there is random people across the world in the billions.
Sure.
But there was something in the voice
that was recorded.
That sounded to me like when Jamie Page fakes an American accent. I could be totally freaking wrong.
No,
and we'll never know unless he tells us.
I don't think that was him. No, I think that was something that was pre-recorded.
But notice how benign. So who knows what that? Let's say it's not Jamie Page. I'm doing a funny, and I'm not saying it is 100%. I'm just saying it reminded me of that. Notice what they decided to contribute to the conversation. Maybe that was meaningful to the person. For some reason, it was meaningful.
Yeah, or just for the lulz.
But notice how Jamie Page popped up. That's almost an admission of guilt without being an admission of guilt. I can tell you right now.
And that's a suspicious mind on your part. But see, that's the reaction. I could have gotten all cheesed off about it. But, it happened. We acknowledge it, boot them off the air, don't let them have the attention that they want, and we move on with life.
Yeah, but you're quite convinced it wasn't JP.
Yeah, I don't think
I'm
it
not.
was.
I'm not quite. Well, but you're.
It's not beyond him. It's not beyond him. Jamie does stuff like that all the time.
He has in the past,
Yes. So it's not beyond him.
and he's
at
probably
this time, I don't think it was him this time.
okay. But check this out. Check this out. So notice,
Hmm.
JP's obviously watching.
Or
We're
listening.
talking about him.
Uh-huh.
He's sitting there. So if he's innocent, let's say he's sitting there, he's innocent. He's having the thrill of his lifetime. If he's guilty, he's having the thrill of his lifetime. Because at the end of the day, and he's not that type of person that would get all bothered by
Nah.
the accusation, because it's not necessarily.
Mhm. Well,
But
he
notice-
can't. He can't.
What is that?
He can't, because he has done that to too many people.
Crying wolf.
Yes, exactly. So he has done that to too many people. So of course he's going to be one of the first names that pops into mind. Jamie, that was a good one. And he's sitting there going, "What?" Or he's sitting there going,
So, and another thing, and we'll leave this part behind us.
Yeah.
What that person said in the
Mhm.
recording or whatnot was
Mhm.
so benign, but what it was. So to me, it's like useless, because they could have gone full throttle, nasty or whatnot, and this and that.
Mhm.
But just the same, that's as much excitement as we've had in a long time up on here.
Jamie says, "I just went back to listen to it. Sounds like they're driving. I don't have a license. I blame Greg on his scooter." Even a Goldwing is louder than that. I think we'd have heard the engine. Plus, it's minus what up there right now? I don't think he's going to be on his scooter.
Yeah, but he injected. You see what just happened? He injected. I think they're driving. You accepted the driving part. I don't accept the driving
I heard
part.
the noise. I heard the noise. And that's why I said it sounded very recorded. The white noise in the background.
Could have been in the bathroom in the John with the fan on top. Going, ooh.
I guess there's that. I guess there's that possibility. I don't know.
Next to the
Well,
the
could have been
engine-
any number of things. It could have been they were on an airplane. I mean, there's there's all kinds of possibilities.
It could be that JP went through a library of sounds, grabbed a car driving sound, sat there and edited that little 2-second smidgen,
Mhm.
He was in
altered
the
his
bathroom, and that was the fan going.
Aha! That explains why he was busy.
There you go. He was doing paperwork.
Aha! Got it. All right.
Were you down by the river with a bar of soap in your hand?
I don't know if he was here for that part. Before it scrolls off the screen. Okay. And yes, this is a subject change. And it already went across the screen. Frankie has a serious question for you.
Okay, sorry, Frankie.
And that is, what is your thoughts on Taylor guitars? I always wanted one, so last year I pulled the trigger and got one.
Then you're not gonna like my answer.
Mm-hmm.
I always found the sound amazing. They were expensive as heck back when I was looking through the guitar shops for acoustic guitars. I always went for the lower cost ones because frankly that's what I could comfortably afford without breaking the bank. They're extremely awesome guitars, but my preference is that if I remember the Taylor guitars, it depends on the model. My preference is that classic steel string or that classic nylon string shape. So if it's one of those strange shapy ones, and whatnot,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not too keen on those. But then again, I'm being nitpicky. I think they sound great. They're great for recording. They're beyond my budget, so that's my answer.
Now he added, and I wanted to get your first gut reaction before I added this. He said, "I've played old, cheaper, beat up ones that sound better."
Okay. Okay, and did he write that before or after I said what I just said?
He wrote that long before.
Okay,
Long
so
before.
so my kindness in my first explanation, I'll be more nuanced and say, yeah, I'm not too fond of them. Last I remembered, but the ones that I did play, they had some there was some good sounds. I don't know, man. I'll tell you what, you don't have to pay out thousands of dollars to get a good sound out of guitar.
And I was going to ask that because you play, and then Jim, you play as well, right? Yes.
Sorry, my internet
Oh, okay.
disconnected.
You play guitar, correct, Jim?
Well, that's a matter of opinion, but yeah.
Okay. Now, I do know and I do understand people will go out and buy a guitar for the name. They want a Gibson SG. They want a Fender Stratocaster or a Telecaster. I understand. They go out and they buy for the name. But especially when it comes to an acoustic, don't you buy based on sound?
Primarily. But I mean, I believe Taylors are beautiful guitars. They're wonderful instruments.
Mm-hmm.
But when it comes to a guitar, there's not very many instruments that you actually literally hug to play it. So it's a very personal instrument. So my opinion has always been play what feels right to you.
Mm-hmm.
What happens with the acoustic guitars, there's bottom line is what Jim said, is what feels good to you, because there's no use in having a guitar, which I've had many, that you don't play because you don't like the feel of it or the sound of it. It's almost like finding yourself a mate for life or for a season.
Linda says she hugs her bagpipes. That's true.
So
she does.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, but and I understand the feel portion of it, believe me, which is why I go so far when it comes to fretboards and necks as far as sanding and smoothing, because I mean, that's your job, your hands. And if you can't stand to touch it, you're not going to want to touch it. So everything has to be silky smooth and, feel good in your hand. I get that. But with all that aside, if it sounds like crap, you're going to set it down and go find something else. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. But for acoustic guitars, in my opinion, I don't know what Jim or yourself would say, but there's a larger room for error in terms of like and dislike, because you're talking about a lot of wood. That's a misnomer, because you can say the same thing about electric guitars, but there's something about electric guitars and the pickups that kind of, it doesn't eliminate the feel issue that we've been talking about.
No.
But by including pickups, there's another generation of sound processing, and it kind of masks a lot of things. It doesn't fool you at the end of the day. But acoustic guitars are bare naked,
right?
Because you're getting the sound that you're getting, and it's filtering into your ear from where you're at. So if that sound from your ear to you holding the guitar and playing, apart from the feel and the tension and whatnot, if that doesn't work right for you, you're not going to write good songs. You're not going to play good songs. You're going to leave it in the corner and do nothing.
You also have to consider that an electric guitar, you're standing in front of the amplifier and that sound is coming straight at you. An acoustic guitar, you're not hearing it. That sound is being projected from the sound hole away from you. So you don't really have a true sense of what it sounds like. You have a sense of what it sounds like from your position as a player.
Yeah.
So it could sound terrible out in the audience or whatever in front of you, but it could sound great to you being above and behind the sound hole.
Well, Eloy and I have had this discussion before, and you can use pedals and various processors and compressors and this, that, and the other to change the sound of an electric guitar. Basically,
completely.
You have an infinite number of changes that you can make. Whereas an acoustic, you can do that too as you're recording or in post or what have you. But when it's you sitting alone in your room just practicing or noodling or trying to write something, that's you That's you and the instrument, and that's it. And if you don't like the feel and if you don't like the sound, does the brand name matter? I guess that's
No,
what
the
I'm
feel
getting
and the instrument matters, not the brand name.
to. Okay.
You
The
see,
instrument does. Like on my proportions and my hand size is different than yours and yours. So my preference might be different than yours and and Eli's. So it's not wrong in any case. It's just right for the person. I like a dreadnought guitar. Somebody might like a concert size. Somebody might like a mini.
there's some. If you remember the band The Kinks, the band The Kinks was an amazing band. I mean, more so than I think today are given credit for. Beyond awesome. Their albums, just amazing. If you listen to, I forget which one, I think it's the Village Green Preservation Society album, which I love. The whole album is freaking awesome. It's a 60s wonderland of sounds. Other people might have different opinions because I don't know how much they can tolerate the 60s whatnot. Some of the recordings of acoustic guitar on that album are total crap. If you're looking at it from a technical standpoint from today's vantage point. However, in the mix of the whole thing, and there's something, I don't want to say cutesy, but endearing about the shortcomings of the full song recorded, edit, EQ'd wise and whatnot, that makes it special. So, but that's on the end of listening. On the end of playing, if it sucks, it sucks.
And that's also with 21st century hindsight, because when that album came out, it was state of the art.
Exactly.
You know, there was nothing newer. That was the height of the technology of the day, and they were pushing the limits of what was available. So compared to a recording made today, it doesn't stand up. But compared to other recordings of the time, it was light years ahead.
You see that guitar right
That
above
Hofner
my
back
finger?
there, yeah.
That's a early 2000s Chinese Hofner approved Hofner guitar made in Chinese factories in order to drop the price so that the public at large that sought these type of guitars that were out of reach economically for kids or others could acquire. When they came out, I forget the actual year, I went directly to get myself one. Directly. I saw it in the paper. I saw it and I was like, oh yeah. But I wanted to physically play it in order to judge that we've been talking about. The feel of that guitar, made in China, is freaking awesome. However, the way the quality control on the electronics was crap. Unfortunately. Some of the buttons don't work or they just... So I need to take that into to be adjusted. But
it's so hard to change pickups and electronics on a guitar. It's very easy.
I know just enough of electronics to be able to do that.
I mean,
you can go on the Seymour Duncan website and they'll have thousands of wiring schematics.
Yep. And
I'm gonna have to do
parts and all kind. Oh my gosh. Yeah, the Seymour Duncan, if you're into working on guitars, the Seymour Duncan website is a rabbit hole that can cost you, if you're not careful, it can cost you thousands to get out of, but you'll enjoy every second of the trip. Just looking at all the options. It's just like, oh, holy cow, I didn't know they could do that.
So in the 1990s, well, across the 80s, in the late 80s, my father went and got me a guitar. I went with him and whatnot. The guitar shops had all the things that they had, including guitar pedals and whatnot and stuff. a friend of mine had a red something or other thrash metal type guitar, candy apple red, with a little amp, and he played it, and I saw him, and I was like, wow, this is like everything I've been looking for. But my dad got me an acoustic guitar.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm glad he did, because I learned on that.
Mm-hmm.
It helped me easily finger guitar chords and all this and that. You can make the argument that you could do it with either or, but whatever. It helped me listen to acoustic songs, and therefore folk music and blues and such and this and that, as opposed to going straight for heavy metal, which would have been a mistake, because if you leapfrog away from those earlier musical styles, you're not learning the tradition, which became the thing in the years down the road. But back in the early 90s, when we were all fiddling around with stuff and getting better and better for our level, I remember acquiring some pedals and being blown away that you can actually, with an electric guitar, produce a sound that's bigger than the room that you're sitting in. And it's all bullcrap, because it's coming from the speaker and the little thing. So you realize you're altering a sound and creating the sound that could be on a record in your frickin' room from a little thing, because of that signal chain or whatever. And then all the echoing devices and whatnot, which had been around, but it was my first foray into all these things. And it really blows the mind of a kid. The possibilities are endless, but without the discipline of sitting down and writing a song and this and that, you're just fiddling. You could spend your life fiddling around, and people do, without creating a final sort of product. And a lot of people fall into that cycle.
Well,
Yeah.
but to a lot of people, that's enough. They don't want to record an album. They don't want to write music. They just want to be able to sit and entertain themselves and maybe their family. It's just something they like to do.
Yeah.
That's pretty much what I do. I don't go play out.
Yeah.
In fact, I haven't picked up my guitar in a year almost.
Well, I don't play, so I don't have that decision to make. But I mean, I don't know. I think it just depends on how serious you want to get into it and how good you become.
There was a time I wanted to learn how to play guitar. Now I just want to learn how to play some songs.
Yeah, there you go.
There's people that I've spent decades playing guitar, and I remember reaching a point, and I'm by no way virtuoso by any stretch of the imagination. I could have been but I was satisfied with the ability to play the guitar and sing and write and sing songs and record them with the level of lead guitar playing and rhythm playing that I had, plus a little bit of piano and some singing and this and that. I was satisfied because it allowed me to do what I wanted to do. But there's so much more in the discipline that I said, I don't want to go there.
Yeah.
What do you want to do? Do you want to become a virtuoso, or do you want to be good?
Or do you want to be happy?
I'll give you two examples on that. Virtuoso, fantastic guitar player, technically superb in every way, Yngwie Malmsteen.
Yeah.
Or would you rather listen to somebody who sat in his bedroom and practiced like Stevie Ray Vaughan?
Right. Although he does cross the line into virtuoso.
Well, but it doesn't have to be either or, because there are times and places for both. But
Well, I still like
get
Stevie
it.
Vai and Joe Satriani.
Yeah, but
Again, they're virtuosos, but they have music. It's more musical to me.
Yeah.
Yngwie Malmsteen, it's somebody wanking on a guitar.
Yeah. They both have their place, but yeah.
They both have their place, and it's an enjoyable thing if you go in one direction or the other.
I don't hate anybody who's a Yngwie fan.
Oh no.
I get your point. I think that your point is clear.
It's just often, not my taste.
No, I get it. More often than not, I'm not pulling out a Steve Vai, which I bought straight out when he came out with it. But with the first albums, I'm not straight out pulling out those albums. I'm not doing any of that lately. But when I did, I would go for a lot of the freaking traditional rock and roll.
Yeah, a lot of the old.
Well, I'd rather pull out some Neil Young.
I've been,
Aerosmith, the Allman Brothers.
I've been more into Motown than anything else here, especially the last 5 or 6 years, and liking that sound, liking that vibe, liking that feel. I have listened to more of Sly and the Family Stone in the last 5 years than I did in the previous 20.
You ever seen the special? What was the Motown band, the backup band that did it for everybody?
Oh God, which ones?
The Wrecking Crew did crossover, but I don't know if it was them.
I think it might have been the Wrecking Crew. They had a big reunion, and they videotaped it. They had a big special on it, and they all got together at the end of it. And the ones that were dead, they had their pictures up, and they were behind Diana Ross and all those bands at the time.
Oh, I know who you're talking about.
Maybe it wasn't the Wrecking Crew. It was
Smokey Robinson and those other people.
And the Miracles, yeah. Well, there were backup bands for all of these studio musicians.
Yeah.
I can't remember what they were called. Oh my gosh. They're going to yank away my Motown card on this. Oh my gosh. I can't remember. I really can't remember.
Just hold it. I'm getting on Google here.
Okay. All right. Well, the Wrecking Crew was in the West Coast. They were down in Los Angeles. The Swampers were back in Muscle Shoals, Alabama. And then you had another crew up in New York in that area.
Funk Brothers.
The Funk Brothers. Thank you. Gosh. Phew. So, yeah. Fabulous musicians that could, and many of them did, break out on their own, form bands, or become solo artists within their own rights. I mean, Glenn Campbell, Dwayne Allman, the list goes on and on and on.
Jimmy Page.
There were a lot of the band. Yeah, there were a lot of people who branched out on their own and became just tremendous names.
The Eagles.
Yeah, they were Linda Ronstadt's band for many years before they became the Eagles. So
there's no way to quantify, even though I'm a little bit not happy with them going on a couple of decades. There's something to be said about the Eagles in terms of pure quality.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, because they were perfectionists. They were absolute perfectionists. And because they wanted everything just so. And if they didn't get it just so, they kept doing it until they did.
It's like Steely Dan did the same thing.
Yes. Donald
Steely
Fagen
Dan
and
would
Walter
hire
Becker.
all the session musicians. And if one person got their part wrong, at times they'd fire everybody and start again.
Yep. Donald Fagen, and it's hard to decide which one was the biggest dictator, Donald Fagen or Walter Becker, because they were both, interchangeable. With the Eagles, you knew it was Don Henley.
One aspect. Go ahead, Mark. I'm sorry.
No, that was about it.
One aspect. I don't know if you'll agree with me or not about those people. 60s, 70s, 80s. Fully 60s and 70s, dwindling across the 80s, but still present. Is that these bands, in my opinion, had legends, story legends that surrounded them, that cross-pollinated with other bands to create a universe of rock and roll that you could read about, that you could visually look at, and that you could listen to, plus the concerts and t-shirts and such and this and that, where you could leapfrog from one to the other and see this badass connection type thing. I could be wrong, but that's missing today, where everything seems like an isolated pocket of crap.
Some of them were committed to music almost to the point of the detriment of everything else in their lives.
Mm-hmm.
Relationships,
Yeah,
drug abuse, you name it. Hygiene.
the fast lifestyle. Yeah. I think another aspect that we kind of gloss over is the fact that music back then was a lot more relatable. There was something working class about it. I mean, there was a huge explosion of music to come out of Detroit. A lot of people think the Eagles are a bunch of California boys. They came out of Detroit. Bob Seger, Ted Nugent. There was a working class family kind of a feel around the whole thing. There are a few singer storytellers like Bob Seger, but you could listen to a Bob Seger album and relate to probably 75% of the songs he on that album. And pick an album, it doesn't matter which one. There was a relatability to it. Because, I mean, if you're thinking about Night Moves, a lot of us have been in that position. We can relate. We know what he's talking about. He doesn't have to say the words. Against the Wind, we've been there. We know that. He doesn't really even have to say the words. Early Eagles was that way. You know, take it easy. Don't let the sound of your own wheels drive you crazy. There was a relatability to it. So that I think is a little bit gone. Now it's ego, you know.
Yeah.
So, and I can't relate to your ego and you can't relate to my ego. But if you look back, it wasn't that long ago, just a few years back, one of the biggest tunes to come out was that Tom Cochrane song, Life is a Highway, because people could relate to it.
I loved it.
You know?
Canadian.
Yeah.
See?
Former leader of Red Rider.
It always happens that way.
Yeah.
When I hear a cool tune by is it Red Rider? Lunatic Fringe.
Yep, Lunatic Fringe is what introduced me to Red Rider and to Tom Cochrane.
Yeah.
And you know why that was written?
And The Boy Inside the Man.
Lunatic Fringe was a gut response to the assassination of John Lennon. When he heard that, he sat down and he started writing about these people. And Lunatic Fringe was born. So, you know. But I don't know. There was a relatability to the music. There was a feeling that they were one of us. You know what I mean?
Well, there was a human touch to it.
Yeah.
Like a personal, like how many people, oh, this is my song because it touches you in a certain way.
Yeah.
Oh, they must be writing about me.
Mm-hmm.
But the world that you guys grew up in wasn't cluttered like the same way as today. So there was a little bit more congealment of shared experiences in terms of less distractions in terms of, entertainment wise. And
I think it was just as cluttered, but I think the attitude of the listener entered into it more than the ego of the performer. You know, if you listen to something like Life in the Fast Lane, you know, it's flying down the highway music, you know, outlaw feel kind to it and everything. There's an ego involved in the people doing it, but we've also all been there. You were talking about don't go 20 over the speed limit. We've all done it. And, you get out there on the highway and you just go. We just we related to that. Oh, yeah. Okay, here we go. All right. This is car driving music. Oh, my God. I'm going to get a speeding ticket, but I don't give a damn. That kind of thing.
I can relate to that one because what was it? Eddie Rabbit, Driving My Life Away.
Yeah.
Was another one.
Yeah. Which actually was a movie song, but it was still a good song anyway. It was a real good song.
I don't
Steve
know.
McQueen by Sheryl Crow.
I don't know that you appreciated the nuance of what I said in terms of a kid today. Hell, us today. We've made this point before. We've agreed on it a million times over. A kid today has not, they don't have to leave their home in order to acquire then some of entertainment. We didn't have that at all. Sure, there was endless things. There's always endless things. I get that. But I mean, hell.
Kid doesn't have to leave his home to create a whole album these days either.
Well, but then maybe I misspoke. We were just as cluttered back then, but we weren't constantly bombarded with that clutter. So I know it's another old man complaining about social media story, but it happens to be the truth. We weren't constantly bombarded with that clutter. You found that clutter if you picked up the newspaper or if you turned on the 6 o'clock news or the 11 o'clock news later at night. But just walking around, me going over to visit my friends, I didn't see that clutter unless I went looking for it. I knew that there were certain areas of town where stuff was happening, but I didn't want to go there. So I tended to hang around with my friends, and it was very easy to avoid that clutter. Now it's damn near impossible. And we went from the Vietnam protest song to now it seems every song has to have a message. Every song has to make a moral point, or every song has to be about getting the bag. There's ego involved in just about everything. There's not really a lot of relatability. So much so that to the point to where when somebody does come out with a song that people can relate to, it explodes. And people, young, old, it doesn't matter, they'll latch hold of it. But that's one of those things.
Secret.
I'm sorry?
Victoria's Secret.
Well, it's one of those things that just it blows up because everybody likes it.
For about 2 weeks.
Yeah. It blows up out of that sea of monotony.
Have you heard that Victoria's Secret song?
No, I haven't.
Victoria's Secrets. And
I know
things
Victoria's
exploding.
Secret, she was made up by a dude. It's about corporate greed.
Well, and again, that every song has to have a message.
But going back to Life in the Fast Lane, that opening riff was Joe Walsh used it as a warm-up exercise.
Yeah. The same with Angus Young and Thunderstruck. That riff for Thunderstruck was a warm-up exercise for him.
The same with Sweet Child of Mine, which is so classic it's not even funny.
It's strange where some of it comes from. Okay, we're starting to repeat ourselves. It's time to either change the subject or land the plane. One of the 12.
In my time, back way back, things used to be like this, and now they're like that.
But you know what?
The guns ruined life for us. We hate you.
See, I decided to get out of that mindset because I think all things evolve, all things mature, all things change. The only thing that remains the same is that everything's going to change.
I love how you just totally rip Led Zeppelin albums, and like our lives are filled with quotations from songs and snippets. So you can
where did you get that? Serious? Did you get that from Led Zeppelin?
You said the songs remain the same.
No, everything remains the same.
Oh, I pulled.
Yeah,
I'm the one doing it. I pulled that. I pulled that sentence, removed one of your words, installed it, and created Led Zeppelin again. See, that's the problem with
we call that selective listening.
That's the problem with years of certain activities.
Yeah. But I mean, the only thing that remains the same is that everything's going to change. Music is going to change. TV is going to change. TV is going to go away. It's already halfway there.
Wash your mouth out with White River soap water.
Just a fact of life. And you know what? It's okay. Because in order for us to have TV when we were growing up, radio had to die. And the only reason our grandparents and grandparents had radio was because vaudeville had to die.
Video killed the radio star.
I think it's a natural progression, and I'm okay with it.
If you remove all the past, or cut it off at right prior to us and after us, we are the representatives, according to this technology right now, of everything that came back in their respective eras. Right now, that's as important and vital as it is. This is kind of a trippy, maybe not trippy, but just in my head type trip. But I'm literally talking to the people that came before you guys and vice versa in our respective time. Just leapfrogging off of what you said prior, that the radio had to die in order to TV and this and that. There was a time that none of this that we're talking about existed, probably during our grandparents, great-grandparents' time, or somewhere thereabouts, where this rock and roll, this theme that we've been talking about, virtually did not exist. They had some sort of, like, what do you call it? Was it ragtime or the blues?
Well, they had swing and they had jazz.
What was that called? I forget now. The which had the same turnaround as the blues. Was it ragtime? It was ragtime, right?
Well, that was back in the early 1900s, late 1800s, up to about, like, say, 1910, something like in that area there.
Good old days, Model A's, radio, yo-do.
So that whole thing that happened prior led to the rock and roll. But the rock and roll era, in my opinion, is 50s. And it's evolving. 80s is the cutoff proper, although you could include the grunge and this and that to a degree, because they were hearkening back to a little bit of that angst with a lot of Neil Young inspiration, except that they were really electrifying the thing, and they're quoted as such. And Neil Young would actually play on stage with these grunge people. So I could bookend it from the 50s, in my opinion, to the early 90s and book that as the era of rock and roll. Everything after, biased as it may sound, is a load of hogwash. Hogwash, I tell you.
Well, just because that era had the best music doesn't mean that all music today is bad. There's still some good bands out there.
You like Billy Joel?
Yep.
Yeah. Listen to the song "Still Rock and Roll" to me.
I've
heard
it 100 times, hundreds of times.
That argument still stands because there are still some good rock and roll bands out there.
Good.
They're not as popular as some of the big names today.
Greta Van Fleet.
Yeah, but what is she doing?
It's a band.
It's a band.
Isn't the lady the lady?
No, that's the name of the band.
Because there's two of them. No, there's one with a lady that does the same as them. I think one of them is the lead singer is a lady, and the other one maybe not. They're young kids and whatnot.
Listen to Greta Van Fleet, and you'll swear you're listening to Led Zeppelin.
Yeah, and they hate that comparison.
Yeah, they hate it because they were influenced by Aerosmith.
But notice what they're doing. That I can accept. But they're copying. I'm using it as a light term.
Listen to the Sheepdogs.
They're drawing from the well. Listen. You can make either argument. There are people today drawing from the well. And there is a well, in my opinion. And that well leads back to the origins of the rock and roll.
They all drew from the well, guy.
Yeah, but rock and roll also drew from a different well. Country.
Yes, I know. You can
blues.
You could put lard on and slide through the crack in the thing. I get it. My point is, and it's always been true, you're right. 90% rough estimate of the stuff out there. Well, I'll put it to you. You name 2 bands that are hearkening back. Do you sit and listen to that on replay? What other bands do you listen to? You guys, being biased here and assuming, go back to the key elements that we all grew up on.
Well, sure, we're always going to do that.
You always go back to what's familiar.
Sure, we're always going to do that. You go back to the 80s. I go back to the 60s and 70s.
No, I go back to the 80s physically.
Mm-hmm.
But in the 80s, I was listening to stuff that was really, remember, I'm a student of music in my respective era. Okay.
Right.
So.
But you still consider the 80s, to you in your biased opinion, to be the best decade of music. And to your way of thinking.
Why would you add that to me?
Because you've said it many times.
Have I? Okay, I'll stick with it.
You've said it many times.
Many times?
And to you, that's 100% correct because that's what you were brought up with.
Yeah, but it's not as clean as that.
That's what you thought was absolutely kick-ass stuff.
Yeah, but it's not as clean as that, Mark.
Understood, because I was in the same boat. I grew up in the 60s and 70s, and I thought that was the great because that was the kick-ass stuff.
No, but
I still appreciated the 50s. I still appreciated the early 60s. But what I'm getting at is they all drew from the same well.
Well, I'd take my favorite guitar players and I'd listen to them. Oh, wow, this guy's really good. And then I'd read about that guitar player and he'd say, oh, well, I was influenced by so-and-so and so. So I'd go back and listen to those guys that he was influenced by. And you read up on those guys and they'd go, oh, well, I used to listen to this, and this. And you'd go back a step farther.
Listen, gentlemen. Truth be told, let's put it out. And there's always a way around this, but I think that what I'm saying is fair and true. And there's other alternatives to everything endlessly. So yes, there's a relativity factor. But gentlemen, when you were growing up in your respective half a month distance,
30-day difference,
in your 30-day difference, when you were growing up, you correct me, however, when you turned on that radio, when you watched the movies, when you watched TV, not only were you participating in the things that were coming out in real time at the moment, but it was mixed with things such as reruns and also other sounds from earlier times. So that as you grow up in your respective 60s and 70s and 80s and whatnot, your experience of that decade is that decade plus. So to talk about drawing from the well, I agree with what you're saying, obviously. But there's something special about the bookends that I mentioned early in that we didn't have all this extra stuff that apparently, I mean, myself, I don't listen to, sure, I'm older, but I don't listen to music as much as that. There's too much stuff.
I don't either.
To sort of get lost in.
Yeah, I don't either. But when I hear a band, I'll go listen to them and see, do I like them? Will I buy their music? Maybe not. Because I just don't listen to music like I used to. It used to be that there was always music playing. Always music playing.
But, you know what I love? I love how Snow Crusher, he's taken it onto himself.
So what's your point?
He's taking it upon himself for some to use me as the anchor for a back and forth instead of jumping in and throwing it down. But he always does. He listens to me. He says, "No, that can't be right." No.
But see, I don't see those bookends as I do see the early bookend is there, but I see the other end. It's just like when you keep adding books, that bookend has to move.
I grew up in a different situation than Mark. I had siblings that were over 15 years older than I was. So I had a sister who had the first Beatles album in North America because she brought it over from England. She was president of the Pat Boone fan club. I had sisters that were in the 60s. That was their music. And me in the 70s and 80s.
Yeah. Well,
and then my dad, he listened to people like Eddie Arnold. Country music.
Yeah.
And my mom listened to classical music and opera.
Yeah. Well,
I'll just stretch it with you guys. I'm sorry, Mark. I'll just be quick. I'll stretch it with you guys and say this. Go around your towns and ask the local gentry, and they will say it's elementary. And ask the local people around there and kids, and hey, what do you listen to? And well, what do you and let them. I haven't done this, so I'm speculating, but according to my biased window into the world through the internet, with the actual windows all shut, it looks like there's so much going on, and people are so nuanced into their little weird crap. And I know it's always been, but my point is, Snow Crusher. What I'm saying is because I feel like saying it. Screw you. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, but it was always that way. It was always that way. Now, I have the advantage of having grandkids that are in that age, in that
Right.
age group, you know, and my kids. They're, they're both in their, well, no, they're not both in their 40s yet, are they? Yes, they are. Yes, they are. They're both in their 40s. To think they're both in their 40s now. So, but they grew up listening to stuff that I'd never heard of. I'd never heard of 311. I didn't know who that was. So I was introduced to that by my youngest daughter. Well, then I started listening to stuff that my grandkids were listening to, and most of it I don't like. It's just not my style of music. But there's,
Baby shark, shark, shark.
yeah, well, no, they're all in their 20s. But so that's my finger on the pulse of what younger people are listening to. There are some good rock and roll bands out there. They're just not as popular as they were in our time,
Well, my son
because R&B has taken over and hip hop has taken over. And so that's what most folks were listening to. There was no hip hop, but R&B was always there when I was growing up. I dug it, but most of my friends didn't.
my son is 38, and he got me into Green Day. He got me into Great Big Sea. He got me into Daniel Radcliffe.
Mhm.
It was like all these cool bands of his era.
Yeah. A lot of it, I've never been one for thrash metal or anything like that. So that's just not my style of music. I can understand the technical expertise. I can understand they are good musicians. It's just not my style.
But don't go too far, Mark. Remember, those people that's not your style
Mhm.
were the ones of your age group that were rocking it, that today are the ones we look back at, like Metallica,
Well, yeah,
Anthrax.
and that's exactly where I was going, because who were they listening to? They were listening to The Who. They were listening to, the big bands of the time. And who were they listening to? They were back listening to the blues greats. I mean, that's where I learned about Muddy Waters and Howlin' Wolf and, Bessie Smith and all the rest of the old blues greats. Was John Lee Hooker. These were the influences of all these other people.
If you had a TikTok, listen, gentlemen, I love the position that I'm putting myself just for the hell of it, like in opposition. If you were like for the hell of it,
It's called in session, and here come the judge.
if you guys back then in your respective homes had TikTok 24/7 and YouTube and blah 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 and blee blee blee, gentlemen, I think you can't go back and think how that would work, but the distraction of it. I mean, my goodness, there's so much, dude. I've seen Eric Clapton stuff pop up like lately, and I'll click on it to watch it because it's Eric Clapton.
Sure,
but without the point of reference of it being Eric Clapton and the things that I grew up listening to.
Oh yeah,
I would pass it by and look, what is it? Squirrel. Oh look,
yeah.
squirrel.
Yeah.
Squirrel.
Yeah. And that's what I mean. It's you are right in that the level of clutter that's out there
is different.
It's and it's easier to get thrown in your face. And that's what I mean when I said
to find some wheat.
Exactly. Well, like I said, back then we still had all that clutter. It wasn't constantly in your face every second of the day.
You had to go to the mall.
Pardon?
You'd have to go to the mall to like experience. Like I remember, so I'm in Miami and you guys are in different places, but I'm sure that there's similarity. Like that would happen to me when I go to the mall. I'd be like, holy crap!
Yeah.
There was like everything. But at home, you have your 4 channels, 3 or 4 channels on TV. You have your stereo,
And you had your
have,
favorite
like,
radio station.
or bike, or your
Mhm.
friends come over,
Mhm.
and I don't know, picking our noses while we're looking at each other. So,
How much new music were you exposed to when you went to the record store? You were going to go buy an album. You had that album in your sight, and you walked in the door and you heard something that was being played. How much new music did you pick up on that way?
2 albums. Harry Connick Jr.,
Mm-hmm.
that Blue album,
Mm-hmm.
released in 1990 or 1991. I don't remember exactly.
Mm-hmm.
I loved and still love. I was eclectic. My
Mhm.
friends did not necessarily, and I keep saying it, appreciate it. But Harry Connick Jr., that album, I listened to it while they were playing in the store. I went into the store and they're playing it. I was like, what's this? And they pointed to the album. It's that album, the record album.
Mhm.
And then they had the cassettes. I bought the cassette because, and I had a record thing, but I bought the cassette because it was the thing to do.
Mhm.
And you can play it in your car and whatnot. Can't bring a record into your freaking automobile. And, but
You could, but it didn't work out very well.
I mean, well, so there was that. And then one time I walked into the same record store and they were playing MTV's live acoustic set of Eric Clapton.
Mhm. Unplugged, yeah.
I stood there. It was probably, but I stood there. I was like, what?
Mhm.
It's acoustic, right? It's not heavy metal, but I was like, what? And Eric Clapton's voice, I'm like, and I just, what's this? Oh, it's that Eric Clapton. And I played that over and over and over again forever and ever and ever. That whole album. That album is to me one of the best albums ever made, in my opinion. Ever.
First Joe Satriani album I was exposed to it over in Germany. I got it on CD. Walked into the stereo shop and it was playing, and I was like, "Who the hell is this?" It's more or less the same thing. Surfing with the Alien, exactly. And go back years, I got turned on to Dr. John the same way. It was just before Right Place, Wrong Time made it big. And I walked into a record shop and that record was playing, and I don't even remember which song was playing. And I'm like, who the hell is this? And, oh, it's that album over there. Dr. John? Snag.
Did you guys let me throw this at you guys. I'm sure I'm going to hear a lot. This is a curiosity of mine. I know it existed prior to your guys' time.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe throughout, but we didn't have this until sometime in the late 80s.
Mm-hmm.
Record stores, you went in, and your reference is what's playing, like you're saying on the record store thing, or on the radio, or through your friends.
Yeah.
Other than that, you go in, you look at the album cover, oh, this band, that band. But at some point in the late 80s, at least here in Miami, and it was Specs Record or some Specs Record, I think it was, they installed booths in the round. And you could sit and ask the person, which was like a teenager that was so full of angst and pissed that you were asking for different records, and they would put it in for you. And we had a listening station for the first time. And dude, that became a hangout place. Did you guys have that?
I never had it, but my parents did. That goes back to the 50s.
Mm-hmm.
Where you could go into a booth about the size of a phone booth and put on a record and listen to it. And if you wanted it, buy it.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't every record store. I never experienced that. It wasn't until much, much later on, I want to say about the late 80s, possibly the early 90s, where you could walk up to the CD rack and there'd be a set of headphones hanging there, or 2 sets of headphones. And you could put the headphones on, and then they had buttons you could push for which album. And it would play a little bit of each song on the album. It wouldn't play a complete song. And say, okay, yeah, I want to get this one.
A very American, I don't know about Europe, but as a throw off from the theme. And when I say American, I mean the Americas. Although I really mean America, but it could encompass whatever, all of North America, I'm sure. I make that distinction because to include everyone. It's very American to have nowadays, and before, a coffee shop, a library, or a bookstore with a record store in it, like Barnes and Nobles did, a little cafe, so you can sit. So not only so you go in, and this was especially true throughout the late '90s and into the early 2000s. I don't know about anymore, but whatever. You could go in, have a coffee, listen to music, read a book, eat a croissant, bagel, whatever, and enjoy your experience at the bookstore. How freaking awesome was that?
Yeah.
We'll be right back.
Okay. We didn't have Barnes and Noble in the town we were in. We had Borders Music and Books.
Borders,
and then Barnes and Nobles came in, and then later on Borders closed down.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it was a very similar thing. And they kind of discovered that that was part of the problem. People would come in, they would read a magazine, they wouldn't buy it. Or they very rarely, the idea behind it was come in, start a novel while you're having your coffee, you'll buy it. And that did work to a point. But some people just didn't bother with that whole purchasing the book thing.
It was an experience.
Mm-hmm.
You went in.
Yeah, it was.
It was so awesome. But the cool thing about Barnes and Noble, and we did have Borders as well, Mark. But Barnes and Noble was like the honcho, the dominant. But one thing that they did have that record stores, funny enough, did not have, they had a section which later they brought in the regular record stores. But Barnes and Nobles had an extensive world music category, and my goodness, and they also had eclectic, sundry 50s rock and roll. Like you could get a Bobby Darin. Sometimes Bobby Darin was not available at your normal whatnot.
Yeah.
But it would be at the Barnes and Noble, and I'd be like, holy crap, Bobby Darin.
Yeah. The record stores that I went to did have a large catalog. I mean, old and new stuff. But you got to remember, albums were still, I mean, I'm talking about, I'm 10, so we're looking at 1971. Albums were still a fairly recent thing. About 10, maybe 11 years old. I don't know what the first album was, but before albums really caught on and took off, everybody bought 45s. You bought singles of songs that you liked. And that's where the Beatles were marvelous marketers, because you could just about buy an entire Beatles album of their first 2 or 3. You could just about buy their entire album one single at a time, between the A side and the B side.
Radio friendly single.
Yeah, exactly. At max. And so not only did they get their music out there, they got it out in mass. Other people saw that and started doing the same. But then albums started taking off, because the single biggest demographic that bought music has always been teenage girls. Always been. And teenage girls didn't tend to have big stereos. They were expensive. They had little record players that an album wouldn't fit on. They still had the close the lid type thing, like a miniature suitcase that you could take over to Susie's house and play records. So an album wouldn't fit. The Beatles, the powers that be with the Beatles knew that, so they released a ton of singles. So you basically bought their entire album one single at a time. And they were fine with it that way. Well, when prices started coming down on stereo equipment, and stereo was in its infancy, there were a lot of albums put out in stereo format and mono format. So you had to be careful what you were buying, or it sounded like crap when you tried to play it through your record player. Anyway, so as the price of turntables came down and stereo equipment came down, albums took off. I forgot where I was going with this point.
That it didn't always.
It's worse with age.
it wasn't always full blown records that
Right.
it started with. That's where you started.
Yes. Okay. So it wasn't, full blown buying albums. It was still a relatively new thing. And so it was being experimented with. I mean, that's when you get into like 2112 from Rush, where they've got, all of side one is basically one song. Or Wish You Were Here by Pink Floyd, which is more or less the same thing. All of side one is basically um, Shine On You Crazy Diamond. So go ahead.
How accurate? I'm gonna test your memory here, or not your memory because you've mentioned it, but full blown albums
Mm-hmm.
had to have occurred way before what you're talking about.
They were out there, but they weren't popular. That's the thing, because a record player big enough to play that 33 RPM was expensive, and little girls didn't have it, and that was who the music was being marketed to.
Because the jazz era thing,
Mm-hmm.
and especially with what do you call it when jazz developed into that fusion type thing? There's a word for it.
The you're talking about swing music and things like that. They were on 78s.
No. At some point, jazz developed. I can't think of it now. Jazz developed into a where it was all weird.
Zydeco?
No, not Zydeco. That's
No, not Zydeco.
Cajun.
There's a name for it. Whatever. It was like more of a modern type jazz.
Modern jazz. I mean, contemporary jazz.
Yeah, where they played all sorts of weird chords and stuff. Not in the 60s. I'm talking about in the 50s, likely the 40s. But
yeah, that's in the beat generation, the beatniks and what have you. Yeah.
I remember watching movies in black and white where they had record. I know it's a movie, but they had records where they play like it was a fancy dinner party and they're sitting there and they do the thing and this and that. So that's why I'm asking you, because I can perfectly imagine old school records existing before your time.
They were 78s. That was almost the size of an album. It was like an 11-inch disc, but it played at 78 RPM.
Okay.
And that would play, maybe a 4 or 5 minute song. But as it got, I'm sorry.
Yeah, about that. About 4 or 5 minutes.
But as it got more and more commercial and rock and roll started to take off, because rock and roll was not popular in the beginning, but as it started to take off and programming directors and marketing managers started injecting themselves more and more into radio, they wanted shorter songs. And so the 45 came out. It was a smaller disc and they could play more of them and run more advertising.
I don't know what's no
How about very few 45s? If I found something that I liked, if I heard a song that I liked, I would go buy the whole album, because I figured on the album there's got to be something else there that I like too.
Right, and if it was a Bob Dylan record, you'd be highly disappointed, especially if it was live. Oh crap! Because I know that happened to me. That happened to me. I listened to a good Bob Dylan song a long time ago, and I said, "Oh well, hell yeah, I'm gonna buy this live at Budokan because you're getting bang for it. It was cheaper. It was cheaper for some reason, and you get all these songs." I said, "Look at this! It's got all these songs." So I brought it home, and Bob Dylan is for like an hour, like it's like, and I learned to love it because I paid $10 for whatever.
Okay, Columbia Records released the first long-playing microgroove record, spinning at 33 1/3 and holding about 23 minutes on each side in June of 1948.
Yeah.
Okay.
What was the album?
I'm trying to find that. It was the New York Philharmonic playing the Mendelssohn Violin Concerto.
Okay.
All right. And it was a demo. The second one was Gershwin's Rhapsody in Blue and Beethoven's Fifth Symphony and a whole bunch. So it was made. And it's funny because that's where a lot of these formats came from. So the 33 and a third RPM record was originally created for longer pieces of classical music.
Okay.
So was the CD. And it evolved down into more popular music. So little girls weren't exactly going out and loading up on Beethoven or Mozart. Well, we can sell this little 45 for real cheap, a quarter or a nickel or something like that, and make a lot of money.
I remember going to the toy store and going for the GI Joes and but I remember passing by like the girls aisles and everything's like pink and bright. And as I remember as a kid looking at it and saying, oh, inside, I felt like this inner welling of like, what is this? This is terrible. And I walked straight to the darker colored,
the blue,
the blues and all that, and I'd be like, yes. But every time I'd walk, and then I see like a little pony with like a little frazzy fraz and stuff, and I'd look at it, and I remember as a kid thinking, I wish I could tear it to pieces. Like my brain was thinking in those terms.
Well,
it's just the
you'd have been completely messed up if you'd have been born in the 1910s, because the whole blue for boys, pink for girls things is fairly recent. It was the 1950s, 1940s.
I don't see it, Mark. I don't see it, but then again, I've been programmed to think it more than likely, because even at home, it was cowboys and I had bookends that were knights, and it was pretty stuff and tigers, like everything was macho sized. I'll take a matcha tea. It was that
up until the 40s and 50s. Up to the 40s. Pink was the color for boys and blue was the color for girls. Blue was the color of the Virgin Mary. And pink was a variation on red, which was a strong, firm, masculine color.
Sure. It doesn't feel like it, but
that's the way it was back. That's the way it was back then. And it's just...
I've read it.
It's hard for me to wrap my head around, too, but it's just because I was always, well, how could you look at pink and not think about little girls?
Sometime in the 80s, I don't remember but I was gifted. My mom said, "Oh, look, it's a gift," and I don't remember what holiday, and so I opened it, and as I unveiled the box, it was a shirt, and it was pink, and I lifted it, and I looked at it, and she said, "Look how that's so adorable! It's a pink shirt." And I thought, and I looked at it, and like I was disturbed. I don't know if you ever got some weird crap like that. But I looked at it and I was like, this will not do. And yet it was given because of an air of sophistication and, this and that. Screw that.
I'm never wearing that.
Hell no. Pink, you know what's going to happen if I take this to school? Are you
You're going to you're a bully's dream. You're going to get beat up no matter which hallway you go down.
Hell no. Yeah, dude.
All right, we better land the plane. It's been over 2 hours.
Did it have big puffy sleeves?
Oh, those didn't come along till the 60s.
And it had like a little unicorn item here.
There you go.
A stitch, an embroidered little unicorn thing.
I've said it before and I'll say it again. The dumbest thing about the 60s and 70s was the way we dressed.
And on the back, embroidered was the word sassy.
Yeah, there you go. Thank God they didn't have sequins.
Why don't you like this, son? Why don't you like this? I don't know, Mom. Look at the word sassy on the back. You know what that's gonna do? I'm lying about that, obviously, but just to take it to the ridiculous. Yep. All right, so we go live every Tuesday. What a
squirrel.
And if you like what we just shared, why, hell, there's more of that and all sorts of other stuff. We go live every Tuesday at 9:30 Eastern, 6:30 Pacific Coast time. We're the Trampled Underfoot podcast show here on YouTube, and we also have a Facebook page with the same name. We post all sorts of links concerning the topics we talk about every now and again, and you can leave comments over there and whatnot. And we also have a webpage where you can catch our episodes past by pressing the Wayback Machine button over on the Trampled Underfoot podcast.com website. And so We're also sponsored by
Harneil Media. You know him, you love him. He's a friend of yours. He's a friend of mine. Steve Nealon over at Harneil Media. If you're thinking about a web presence, you want to build up a web presence, or you just want to create a web presence, there is no better place to start than with Harneil Media. You need to set up a website, set up a web store, get yourself an email address with your web domain after the little @ symbol. That's the way to go. And Steve Nealon is your man. He's very, very competitive priced and 100% personalized service. When you're dealing with Harneil Media, you're dealing with Steve and nobody else. That's Harneil Media, HARNEAL media.com, sponsor of Trampled Underfoot podcast.com.
All right, thank you. And we also want to thank Jim Dockrell for hanging out with us and shooting the breeze back and forth. Jim, anywhere that you'd like folks to visit, any link or anything you'd like to mention, feel free to do so. It's welcome.
No, I think I'm okay. I've kind of abandoned social media somewhat, so I should say that the views expressed in this podcast do not reflect the views of our sponsors.
I appreciate that.
There.
So we wish you guys a very happy rest of the week. Enjoy yourselves. Be good. And we'll catch you here next time. Good luck. Enjoy. See ya.
Peace.
Keep on rocking in the free world.